Hi, Barbara.
Hi. Am I there?
You're there. You and me. It's you and me.
And Renee.
Did you hear the foxes howling tonight, Barbara?
Is that, are you sure it's the foxes and not Bella?
No, I was watching them.
Oh, yeah. There's one beautiful fox who's come around our house.
It's been living underneath our porch with its babies during the winter, and I had to chase them away with coyote gook.
Oh, they're so cute.
They're cute until they're sleeping literally up against your front door, and then they're disconcerting.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, we've got woodchucks under the porch.
Yeah, well, they're in the old woodchuck holes.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
So now it's a foxhole.
Was. We're trying to make that a past tense.
It's beginning to
Hey,
feel like November. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Mark.
Greg seems strangely inanimate.
You probably had a long day.
Oh, it's just no, I'm just reading things, but it's been a long couple of weeks. I don't know if you've seen outside of Tompkins County, but Cayuga County is going through a big spike in COVID cases, and
Mm,
our health department is grossly understaffed, and so I've been working overtime for the health department as some other planning staff have, and it's just a tough time in local government where there's just no, there's no other funding coming to governments, and people are
yeah.
understaffed and furloughed and budget cuts. It's just yeah, it's a pretty stressful time, but
Yeah, we're getting slammed in Tompkins County now too,
yeah.
like terribly.
But one of my kids lives in Iowa, and the number of cases in their county is different by an order of magnitude, and the governor is just incompetent, and the risk that people there are exposed to is just 10 times what we're experiencing here.
Good evening.
Evening. Waiting on Ken is here. I guess we're just waiting on Rebecca and Bill. So we'll wait just a minute or two. And it looks like we did have a privilege of the floor person. Where did they go?
Renata Farrow is on.
She was. Oh, there she is. I suspect that's what she's here for.
Find out.
Just an intuition I have.
Yes, I am here.
Let's just wait just another couple of minutes to see if Bill comes. And Rebecca, I don't know, she had emailed someone I noticed this week.
She's been pretty missing in action.
Yes, unfortunately. Here comes Bill.
But I have gotten a couple of emails from her.
I haven't heard from her. Hey, Bill. So everyone's here except for Rebecca. It looks like we have one privilege of the floor. So I will open our, believe it or not, November 23rd meeting of the Caroline Task Force. This looks like it's our 12th meeting. So now you all know why you're so tired. And so we have a privilege of the floor, and so we'll take the privilege of the floor and then begin our agenda. So I believe Renee Farrow is here.
I am. I'm sorry to miss Rebecca because I don't think I know her. But I just wanted to, especially for those of you that don't know me, I'll just briefly say that, I've lived an individual, I'm speaking actually as an individual, and I just want to say that up front, and not as a partner of others that you may know. A lot of you know that I've been working since the 1990s on getting our local candidates, really good ones, competent ones, in office in the town of Caroline, but also, regionally and also nationally. And I realize that planning and zoning is not a Democratic issue, or it's not a Republican issue. It's not an independent issue. It's an issue that really involves our entire community. And I want to say to you that since, I think it was since the 1990s, I've been working with the Democrats. But at that same time, I also was really blessed to teach at Caroline Elementary School, which is where I met so many of you and probably many of your children. And I probably taught some of your children in art. And this was before I went on to get my MFA and teach at Cornell, where I currently am. But I just wanted to say that we have such, our community, as I see it from my perspective over these years, is that it's so strong. And I've had actually the opportunity to write about it as an artist. And I'm on a international group of people of 2,500 people. And I think everyone knows about Caroline because I always write about it and speak about it in such an amazing, utopic, ideal way, right? Why is it utopic? Why is it ideal? Well, you know, some of the things I've been thinking about is that, you know, we all are accepting of one another on most days. I think we are, we kind of nurture, and we're trying to really nurture a sense of a diverse community. I think that we're so amazingly blessed by the water and the land and the land that we live on, especially in regards to, you know, this climatic disruption we're in the middle of. You know, before this, we were protected from COVID, and, you know, unfortunately right now we're not, but we seem to live in a little bubble. And I'm afraid to say that that's changing. It's been my observation, just especially in the last 3 or 4 years, that we could be potentially a victim of huge, big business, corporate offices, attempts at these large corporations and businesses to make a profit at all costs. They don't care about our community. What they care about is making a profit and just, you know, doing what they need to do and then moving on. It's not an investment, it's a community. It's more of an investment in their own selves. And I think that because of that, we have to be realistic. My sister is a planner. And I think one of the things we have lots of conversations about is that while planning is important, it's not going to hold up in a court of law. It will not. And you absolutely have to have smart, careful, strategic planning, or I'm sorry, zoning, in order to reinforce that planning. And so I just wanted to come to you to share. I know I heard through the grapevine that you were possibly talking about zoning, and I know, you know, I have no idea where you fall in that. You know, you may be for it, you may be against it, I don't know, but I'm just begging you to consider that outside forces, I think, are greater than the ideals of our community. And we just had our granddaughter over who's 18 months old, and our son and daughter. And I just realized that the life they led from 1990 to present is not necessarily the life that will be Caroline from, say, today for another, you know, 25 years or 29 years. You know, they're in that age range. And so what can we do to protect that? What can we do to kind of really ensure that all of those good things are gonna, you know, stay true? So anyway, I beg of you to, you know, keep the faith. We want to keep on working as we have been since the early 90s. And I just, you know, we've made such progress, and I just want to ensure that, you know, we keep doing that. So, and I just, so you know, I mean, I know that Bill has heard me talk about pro zoning. I've been pro zoning for many, many years. But what I realize is that I think it's just, we're at a threshold. And every time I look around us in other towns, I see where it's been done really badly. And so I think being smart and strategic are going to be really important. So anyway, bye guys. Thank you so much. And Tim, is this put on some kind of record?
It's recorded.
Oh, good, great. So I don't have to write it up and send it? No, okay.
Mark
all
will
right.
take care of it. Mark has power.
Oh, Mark is there? Oh, I don't see him. But anyway, all right. It's really nice to meet Greg. And I think maybe I know everybody else. I'm not sure. But anyway, Bye, guys. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you. So tonight, hey, Rebecca, you're here. Nice to see you. I don't know if you can hear us.
Your name, right?
We see your name.
There you are.
Hi, I have really bad bandwidth, so it's better if I keep my camera
That-
off.
That's
Is that
just
okay?
fine. That's absolutely fine.
Okay.
We're happy to see you. So I sent around.
I've been keeping up with other meetings. Sorry.
I'm sorry?
I said I've kept up with all the readings. I'm sorry that I've missed so many meetings.
Oh, great. Thanks, Rebecca. So I sent out an agenda, but I just happened to call it up and I made a mistake. So what I propose to do tonight is to work from now until roughly, let's see what we can get done, 7:45, 8 at the latest, to just stop the eyes on the design standards and site plan. I think most of it's agreed upon and taken care of. And then once we do that, I'd like to have Greg lead us in a discussion, which we haven't had amply yet, on what would be involved in zoning options and zoning possibilities, just broadly, and we can have a chat about that. Does that sound good to everybody? So to do the, Greg, would you be able to throw up your marked site plan? Probably,
Yeah.
should we do site plan review first? Is there anything that we have yet to do to decide on design? I saw a couple of things myself on site plan that I'd like to talk about, but
Yeah,
we'll do
maybe we
site
start
plan
with
and then go to
site
design.
plan. Yeah,
Okay.
because we're pretty close on that one, I think.
Can
So
I,
if
wait
you
a
let
minute, I need to make you a co-host, Greg. Wait one second. Okay, sorry.
All right.
And Mark, I just made you a co-host. I hadn't done that before.
Oh, 1 second. Sorry. Let me just. I'll pull up the site plan with edits, just that one might be a little bit easier to navigate. I had sent around 2 versions of the site plan, one with the red text that are new, and then the other one, which is sort of the proposed final document. So I guess, Tim, do you want to just watch for people's hands, or, you know,
I think
Maybe-
maybe if people just, since when you take over my screen, I can't see everybody. So I think
oh,
if
okay.
you all just want to speak up, I think that'll work out fine, right?
Yeah, maybe because we went over this in great detail over 2 or 3 meetings, there really shouldn't be. I sent around what the edits were on the email. I think there were a few that I made, and there's one in particular that I was having some email exchanges about the word density. But maybe we just take people's, if people
That's a good
have
idea.
questions or comments, we could just kind of jump to those.
Right, that's a very good idea.
Does anybody?
Anybody have anything particular? I have a
Yep,
couple.
Ken.
Ken,
You're
on
on
mute.
mute, Ken.
You're still on mute, Ken. Ken, you're on mute. Do you remember how to do it? It's
Oh.
on the,
Can you unmute him,
Yeah.
Tim?
Oh, sorry.
yeah, I should be able to. Wait. Yes, good idea.
Okay,
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
sorry
got it.
about that, Ken. That was
Can you hear
my
me
fault.
now?
Yes,
Thank
that was
you.
my fault. Sorry.
That's all right. Doesn't matter about fault here. I had a question on something, a couple of different things, but the first question I got, I have it on page 5. It's in definitions. And in C, you get down to 3 lines up from the bottom of C. And I don't quite understand in each case, also including the management. Oh, I went too high. Practices that allow land used for agricultural activity to lie fallow for a period not exceeding 5 years. What are we getting at there? That's not an agricultural operation if it's over 5 years. Is that correct?
No, the way the language is worded is that if a piece of ground has lied fallow for more than 5 years, then it is not considered part of this definition anymore.
So just to clarify, it would not be an agricultural
So,
operation, but it would still be included under agricultural resources if it has those kinds of soils that are in the next definition.
Correct.
Does that
So-
clarify things for you, Ken?
well, if it's, if I, this is the way I understand. So if it's fallow for more than 5 years, it's not part of an agricultural operation anymore, but it
Correct.
is part of an agricultural resource. Okay, and in 4 years, it's still a part of the operation. Okay, that's one question I had, and I guess I've got a couple others, and I'll leave somebody else something to ask questions first, and then come back to me.
All right, I saw Barbara Lynch's hand.
Yeah, on specific standards and considerations, I'm going to K, which was sound. And I did some research on sound. And I'm just wondering where the decibel levels are now set.
I believe those were removed.
I think sound is a critically important part of site plan review. To be surrounded by loud
Yes.
noises is
All right.
worse than visual, seeing a flat roof, for example.
I agree.
Now, is sound being handled by the town anyplace else?
No,
I
no.
would feel very uncomfortable to see it removed.
So the discussion on this, Barbara, just to give you the background on this, that the subcommittee worked on, we debated and discussed in the subcommittee in detail how noise and sound should be handled, and and considered different decibel levels, considered what the city of Ithaca actually does, and the city of Ithaca has a decibel based regulation or ordinance or something like that. But bottom line was that there was so much controversy and so much opposition about a noise ordinance in the town of Caroline in the past that we opted to recommend not including it in the site plan review law over concerns that could swamp all of the other interest in good things having to do with the revisions in the law. So there was just a lot of concern that because noise ordinance was played down and had such negative reaction by the town widely when it was considered, that it should not be included in this one. So that's the background on it. But certainly the task force could have more discussion on it.
Yeah, I think my question is when that noise ordinance was introduced.
Does Mark know?
It was around 2009, maybe. I'm
So
forgetting.
it would have been 10 years ago.
Maybe
That's
earlier than that even.
Maybe. Okay.
So, the question is whether that's ancient history or not.
Another question is, there will be things that are put forward in the proposed site plan law that some people will object to.
Mhm.
That's why we're going to have public input on it. And that's why it might be revised from what we have proposed. And I frankly think it's not responsible of us not to put forward what we think is the right thing, because we're afraid of public comment. I think we should welcome public comment. And if people come out in droves and say that this sound thing is, terrible, the town board can take it out. But I think if we think it's a good idea, we shouldn't be chicken. And frankly, I'm sure there are going to be various pieces of this that people will object to, and that's why we go for public input and why the town board may make a change. So I tend to agree with Barbara Lynch that we should put something forward.
And if there is something put forward, again, just reflecting the reasoning of the prior discussions, is that building or mimicking something from a city ordinance, which is what the earlier proposed language that is now removed did. The argument there was that that would not be appropriate because a city ordinance does not reflect the needs, the noise related needs and the noise related lifestyle of people in rural areas. So I think that, the message there is that if a certain decibel level is going to be included in this, it should reflect what is appropriate for a rural area like the town of Caroline, with a variety of uses, like the use of ATVs, like the use of farm machinery, like the use of various things that one might not expect to find in a city neighborhood. And so there might need to be some more research done, therefore, on what an appropriate decibel level would be in a rural community like Caroline.
I think that's very sensible. You mentioned ATVs were the first out of your mouth.
Mhm.
If I had, and it could easily be that my next door neighbors have teenage kids and they run ATVs all the time. It would drive me crazy. It would make me want to sell my property. So I do think it's appropriate to think about what is in a rural area. And in contrast, I think farm machinery, well, that's going to happen. And I think that
Mhm.
probably is actually may well be protected under ag district and ag laws. But I would say that you can have something that exempts farm operations. You might want to set times of day, although I know sometimes when the hay is right to be brought in, people will do it in lights at night. So you can make exceptions to do that if it's a work-related thing regarding agriculture. So I'm in favor.
I raised the ATV example because that was one of the prime areas of discussion in the earlier 2009 or whenever noise ordinance discussions. And there were a number of families who were concerned about their teenage children who participated in very actively ATV competitions as a form of sport and a form of personal development and award winning. So just to emphasize that that's a very real concern, or it was at that time in the town of Caroline.
Well, that's
There is, in a way, this is a red herring, because what we're talking about is development. And what would be of concern here are either industrial or commercial developments that would be associated with the emission of sound.
Yep.
And if we were concerned about sound from existing properties, then that's something, Greg, that can be addressed in zoning? No, because zoning is new development. So it would have to be a separate, how could we address the fact that my neighbor may decide to put in a go-kart ring or, no, he couldn't, because that would be, but their kids run the ATVs all day. How, in what kind of a law could that be addressed?
It'd be a standard nuisance law, and those are often those precede many others laws. I'm looking up Caroline's local laws right now, if there is just a basic nuisance law, but it sounds like this has been researched before and gone over before. Tim, you've had history with it too, but yeah, typically. I mean, so yeah, noise can just be a part of a general place's nuisance laws, and then and then it's just that it doesn't have to necessarily be in zoning or anything. It can just be a town-wide law. But it also, I mean, I just haven't seen it as so in depth as it needing to be in zoning, where certain zone districts have higher levels of sound versus others, but I mean, that's certainly conceivable, given that zoning can do that.
Can I make a suggestion just to, so we don't get too bogged down in this? That, I mean, this could be a case of the task force making a recommendation to the town board to clarify sound limits in site plan review, as opposed to the task force itself completely delineating that by going into the weeds, because basically, I mean, I think that what the town board will welcome is the recommendation to pursue certain tools without expecting all of the I's and the tools to be dotted. I mean, this is an incredibly detailed and precise document, which is going to be very, very helpful, but it probably doesn't have to be totally 100% complete, if you hear what I'm saying, if it would allow us to progress.
I would like to respectfully disagree. I think we might want to recommend to the town board that they look at a nuisance ordinance that would address sound throughout the town. Because I agree that's not something we're prepared to take on, and that's where the ATV stuff would come in. But I think, as Barbara Lynch pointed out, in the site plan review, what we're talking about here is basically commercial developments. And I don't see why that's not likely to be so controversial, right? Because it's not somebody's ATV teenager. And I think this is the appropriate place to talk about it from commercial development. And I don't see why we need to necessarily put it off. I think we could, I don't know whether Barbara Lynch is willing to do a little more research into, or Greg can do a little more research into noise decibel levels from commercial developments, which is what we're talking about. But I think we should put it in here, because I think the reality is there's going to be a lot on the town board agenda, and my guess is we're not going to get to a nuisance ordinance for quite a while. So why not put it in here when it's not likely to, we don't have to deal with the ATV question.
Yeah, I would be prepared at this point to suggest that a decibel level of 55 during the day, which is what it turns out in the US that is all over the place, but the EU has been very thoughtful, and WHO has been very thoughtful. And 55 decibels during the day, 45 at night is considered, at the property line is considered reasonable.
I was just looking up a definition online, and it says a sound intensity of 55 decibels is not very great. Quiet conversation in a home is approximately 50 decibels. The sound intensity of 60 decibels is comparable to a conversation that takes place in a public place such as a restaurant. I mean, I'm just a little bit concerned that that would be quite a low threshold for any commercial development.
At the property line, we're not talking about in the development, but it's what the neighbors hear. Inside the bar it can be very loud. And that's fine.
Well, I mean, I think at this stage, I would recommend that you all come to a consensus and put in what you would like, because I mean, obviously this is going to get vetted again anyway. So, I mean, I don't think it's worth delaying too much over it, which is what I was trying to say in the first place.
Yeah, that sounds fine to me. Essentially, Tim's saying, pick a number and then that'll be vetted, investigated further. I do have a question though about, like, I may have missed this, I had to step out of the room for a minute. Our ag operations, does this apply to them? And how does that 55 decibels sort of compare to a typical boundary at a farm of a tractor running?
Yeah.
I
So
think an exception could be made for
no,
agricultural
they're
operations.
It already is.
already made, and the very first
Okay.
part of.
I was
Article
trying to
2.
remember that. Thanks, Greg. Thanks.
Yep.
Perfect.
So yeah, I mean, common practices for agriculture, they're at night, they're operating heavy machinery. So New York State protects those operations
Okay.
very strongly.
And I just saw online, CDC says noise over 70 decibels for a constant period can damage your hearing.
Mhm.
So,
All right. So a number like 65 dB at the property boundary is not bad. Be below a threshold of pain and damage, but above a loud conversation.
but annoying, right?
Yeah.
Annoying, very annoying.
Very annoying.
So
I wonder
Barbara,
if
or
it's louder, if it's as loud as the fox that was braying outside my house tonight.
Oh, that's an amazing sound. And if that was going constantly day in, day out, you'd want to move.
They do.
So I guess my question is, do we have is there consensus to add some language in, and somebody is going to draft language and then send it to me? Do I understand that correctly? I guess
I could
you-
draft language and send it to you if you want.
Okay.
Okay, I guess, but then is there is there anybody against adding this language? I mean, seems okay.
The only
And-
question I have is I guess I don't know the decibels and whether or not, something can be done for an hour as opposed to 10 hours. Is there a time span that a little bit louder is okay and
Yeah,
or not?
yeah. So can
I don't know how well
Yeah.
75 are.
Yeah, so that is just getting into code enforcement, and so people try to skirt the law as best they can in various places. So maybe they run something very loud for an hour and they get away with it. Maybe they do that twice a week, they still get away with it. But eventually, they might get caught. They're kind of, we're setting a law, and just kind of hoping that there's going to be code enforcement, and then people just abiding by the law. These kind of nuisance issues are really, nobody's going out there. There aren't. I don't think there's a lot of code enforcement staff in Caroline sort of patrolling the streets for these kind of issues, and so a lot of issues like this kind of come up as just general nuisance complaints, maybe to the local municipality. Because this is part of site plan review, though, it's just reviewing new development coming before the board. A nuisance law might establish noise ordinances for across the board, whether you're established or not. But site plan review is just capturing any new development that meets the thresholds in Article 2 coming to the board.
And they should be able to know what kind of noise they're going to be making.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so putting this in there, the review board would be in their, authority to ask, what is the noise ordinance, or sorry, what is the noise level of this use?
And actually, it would make sense to me that we include in the checklist of what they're supposed to submit, that they should submit proposed sound levels at the property line. Maybe at the discretion of the board.
Yeah, you could. It's
Why not?
the photometric plan is similar. So photometric plans, I think right now it's part of its discretion of the board, and those are I don't know the exact cost, but I know that I've seen them required before, and they are an extra step for a developer to do. It's a little bit of an engineering study to figure out the light level and maybe the sound level. So it is another cost to the developer. And so maybe it is more of a discretionary approval. If there is a larger development coming in that the review board just says, hey, we just need some more information, and the local law says that, they can be up to a certain level, you are within your authority to ask for that.
Yeah,
So-
I would be, this is Barb. I would be in favor of it being at the discretion of the review board, just like the photometric plan is.
Good. I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
Okay, so then is Barbara Lynch, are you going to just draft up some language and send to me?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Are there, Ken, I just saw Ken's hand first. I didn't look down the list, but Ken, certainly.
You know, somebody else got something, go ahead.
Did,
Go ahead, Ken.
But I'll go.
Good.
Under the definitions, economic impact assessment, I thought it was a real good definition. And
okay.
and we also have the design standards. If the site review board is gonna, it's up to them to decide, okay, we're gonna ask questions about economic impact. Are we having a small section similar to design standards with what the trigger might be, which for the town, it should be something like, what is going to be our expenses toward services once they put in a road back to their development, and now they want to give it to the town or other services. And then the committee had numerous questions, and there are probably a lot more. So is there going to be a little section on that, or are we going to just put in a trigger for the site review board, or
Yeah.
everybody's good with it?
So I'll go over that, Ken. Right now, as it's laid out in the site plan review law, it is not a trigger. It's at the discretion of the review board. And there is a section on it in Article 3, just with, and we can get there. I mean, I guess I could just scroll down to it if you don't mind me here. It's just stating that it's at the discretion of the review board to ask for one. I did have a chance last week to talk to somebody at the state about economic impact analyses and how the town is adding this language. The language is fine right now if it's discretionary. They did advise that, you know, these really are for very large developments. If the city of Ithaca did one for Walmart, and if, you know, typically there's larger developments. But they did say if you want to start adding in specifics about actual cost to the town and maybe number of local jobs created, or I don't know, other parameters that are very finite, they did suggest that the town would need to go through a baseline economic analysis, or an economic baseline, essentially, to hire to figure out what can Caroline absorb. Because as the person who I spoke to put it on the phone, she said, you know, Caroline might want certain types of development that it's not even thinking about right now, but once you do a market analysis by a private company, or, you know, somebody just to analyze the town to see what could Caroline absorb, then it might shed light on other things. So long story short is that, yes, Ken, it is captured in the site plan review law. There are not specific triggers that would require one or the other. It's simply at the review board's discretion. And that's about as kind of far as it could go for right now. So all the analysis that
Okay.
your subcommittee did and the questions that were raised, I think those are very good, but a lot of them are in question format. And I think that means that it deserves more attention. And the person on the phone kept saying, well, what does the town want? Like, what are some actual finite things the town wants? And they might not be able to know that until they really do a full analysis on the market availability in the town.
So this is Barb, just to clarify, that the economic impact assessment is included in the definitions, because that's like a formalized study with, you know, specific parameters. And it's also indicated that the review board has the liberty, the ability to request an economic impact assessment. So, but I just want to be clear that the site plan checklist that is required of everybody does say under item 4U that every development has to submit a description of likely economic impacts from the development for town residents and businesses and fiscal impacts to the town budget. So that's not at the level of a formalized environmental impact assessment, but it is to give some indication of predicted impacts.
Can I ask, could the review board ask for some components of an economic review? So it sounds the way you just reviewed it for us, Barb, that there's an on and an off switch, that the board can say, give us an economic analysis. And it sounds like maybe we would like to let the board ask for some more limited pieces of that. And you were just saying there's one limited piece, which is the impact on the town budget. It seems to me one might also want to ask them about employment. How many people are going to work there? Who are those people likely to be? So is there some way to say that the board can ask for an analysis or components thereof?
Yeah, and I'll follow up on that, and to Barb's point too, that yes, and that was advised as well, is that the town could ask for things of the development that might paint an economic picture for them without necessarily asking for a full-blown analysis. So certainly there could be, how many employees you're going to have? Are they full-time, part-time? You know, there could be a sort of just a one-page checklist, or however the town wants to do it, about just criteria that the development needs to fill out. So I gather that from this a little bit, this could be expanded, just to include those some more kind of quantifiable items.
Now, if it's a formula business, there would be reason to ask about the history of hiring in the business. Suppose an Amazon warehouse wants to come in to the town of Caroline. Well, what's Amazon's history with labor policy? That should be part of their review, not everybody's necessarily, but I think for formula businesses, one could be a little bit more rigorous.
And again, can we do that in some way that allows the board discretion of who to ask what for?
Yeah, the only concern that I have about that is that there has been a lot of discussion that a site plan review law is not the mechanism to try to discriminate types of businesses, nor geographic locations in the town. That's better reserved for zoning or other mechanisms that can make those distinguishing. That a site plan review law is supposed to apply to like big buckets of things, and so that's my only concern. But nonetheless, I mean, it could be written in here to apply to formula business, and then that's something that the attorney is asked to weigh in on.
I mean, I would.
Yeah, I tend to start with Barbara. I like where Barbara Lynch is going with this, but I think that I agree this is not the right tool. I mean, I get a little uncomfortable if we're applying one set of standards to one business and not another. I think that's like to get shot down, but also it gives me a queasy feeling in my stomach. I understand why Barbara Lynch is suggesting it, but it isn't. I think it won't fly legally. But that's really the lawyer's call. We could have it as a thing that anyone who has to do an economic impact assessment has to do, potentially. Now, but I also don't know that your hiring practices are really an economic impact factor.
So following up on that, if every development was required to submit a one pager of 10 or 15 impacts of the development on, or just to list certain things. That's required of all businesses coming in, or all new developments. Then that could be used as evidence to maybe for the town board, or not the town board, but the site plan review board to require additional information, which is common for site plan review boards to ask for additional information from varying development to another. One development might be very straightforward, it's easy to review, so on and so, moving on. But other developments, you might need to ask, wait, can we have a little bit more detail on the engineering study? How did you get to these numbers? So I think if it really is a concern to understand more about the business, then maybe there needs to be a little bit more information about what types of economic impacts are going to be reviewed or considered.
Could we just, in this bullet that were description of the likely economic impacts, add a bullet that said, or add something that basically says, and, respond to the data sheet provided by the town having to do with, employment and economic practices or something. So we don't have to spell out in this that you have to, how many employees and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But for this
Yes.
information sheet that will be given to them that they would be required to fill out. I think that's
Yes. So that could just be part of an application process. So I'm sure there's a Town of Caroline site plan application, and that could just be part of the application process.
good.
That's good to me.
But on that note, that should be, somebody should draft that, unless the language will stay just like this.
Doesn't the language that we have pretty much pertain to that?
No.
In description of likely economic impacts, and then as part of the application procedures, the code officer would present this form as part of the packet to be filled out.
Yes, I was just suggesting, Tim, if somebody on the task force were to just, to take a crack at that kind of data sheet, but.
Actually, does it say that, Tim? Description of the likely impacts from the development for town residents and businesses? What does that mean? On town residents and businesses?
I would think on town residents
Oh.
and businesses.
And I wouldn't even have that. I would just develop description of the likely economic impacts from the development and fiscal impacts of the town budget, because,
Yep.
yeah. So if we just take that out, then I think could work on a data sheet.
Okay. Unless there's anything else on that, does anybody else have any other?
I had two minor things.
And I have one
Um,
thing too.
Are you gonna finish that?
Sorry, what?
You're gonna finish that sentence there? Development on the fiscal impacts to the town?
Oh, I'm just highlighting this. Yeah, I mean, I could just, I wanted to, I was
Okay.
going to highlight it so that I have two documents open for this, but I know to delete them.
I had just a couple quick ones. So 3.02 G6.
3.02. Okay.
G6, it just says the development shall not result in significantly increased traffic on local roads. I kind of brought this up before. I think I wonder if it might be just helpful to say the development shall describe. I mean, it's just hard to imagine how any development couldn't result in significantly increased traffic on the roads. So, but I think what's going after for is to have for the site plan, for the review board to have an understanding of how significant an impact it would be. Do you hear what I'm just trying to get at? This sounds like a prescription, like a requirement and some kind of legal level, whereas as a reader of this, it just seems natural.
Yeah,
So
so
I think that, Tim, I think the intention was that whoever wrote that was trying to make sure there wasn't much increase in traffic. That is,
Right.
that would be a break on development. I don't know that that's what the document wants to say, but that's whoever wrote it wanted to say.
No, I understand that. I understand
Yeah,
that. I'm
I just
just-
want to make sure that what the committee actually wants it to say.
I mean,
Task force.
I'm just wondering whether that might be the kind of barrier that the town might regret at some point or another if it were to entertain a development that was extremely attractive to it. And then this natural result of it would, because there is going to be, we do need to have some kind of economic development in the town of Caroline. We simply can't afford, from a town board perspective, to stay where we are and increase town services as we're requested to, unless there's some kind of economic development in the town. So just as a balance, it's just something that caught my eye.
yeah, that's a good point, Tim. And if developments are done along state routes, the New York State Department of Transportation likely sets limits for allowable car, VMT, vehicle miles per traveled, or sort of how much the road system can handle. So if it was on a state road, what I'm getting at is that the DOT would weigh in for this. But if it was on a local road or a county, so if it was on a county road, the county would weigh in and say,
Right.
yes, this road can handle it, or no, it can't. And then if it was a local road, the town would say that. I think that's where, this got added in, and I think this was one of my
Yes.
suggestions.
Yes,
And a traffic impact analysis is a fairly common analysis that an engineer will put together, assessing sort of the transportation trips per day of that development in the situation that it's in.
And I guess it's because this does say local roads. So does that only mean town roads?
yes.
That's how that means. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, actually, good catch. I did not read that closely. Okay.
So Tim, your suggestion is just to roughly take that out. Just since we're getting the traffic impact analysis, you don't have to request it here because it's already been requested. So would you actually want this deleted?
Again,
I can
think
understand why members of the task force might want it. I'm just wondering if there's a more nuanced way of putting it so that there to be at least some flexibility. I mean, I think that the reason to have something like this would, if the traffic impact study came in and it was just abominable, then the review board can say, hey, this is abominable, we can't do this.
can they? On what grounds?
No, I'm just saying, I'm assuming that that's why this language
Right.
is in here.
If language isn't here, then I don't know what the review
Right,
board can do
right.
about it. And again, since it is local roads, we're not talking county roads, we're not talking the state highways, then if there's economic development that has traffic associated, it's probably a more reasonable thing to put it on those roads. I don't know.
I don't really have an answer either. I mean, you can change significantly to large increase, right? If we want to say they shouldn't have some huge increase in traffic, that might be reasonable and leave a lot of wiggle room, but that's almost so wishy. I just don't know. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, I'll follow up with kind of what I was sort of saying earlier. Now that I see that it's just local roads here, is that it doesn't. I don't think this does much, because the only way to know if it's significant or not, I mean, no lay person can ever say if it's. I could never tell if a development is significant or not unless seeing a traffic impact analysis. Usman, looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, how about the suggestion does not impact the function and the quality of local roads? So we do not talk about the traffic volume because we don't know how much traffic volume will damage the road or something like that. So the language should be, I don't know, changed into and the development should not result any significant change or quality of local roads. That's it. Not the volume of the traffic. I don't know. That's my suggestion. Sorry.
I was actually starting to think along similar lines. I mean, the language could refer to essentially the lifetime of the road, because roads are designed to last essentially a certain amount of time with a certain level of traffic. And if you change the amount of traffic, then the lifetime is shorter. So you could say
Good.
that, and the other is the safety, right? It shouldn't have so much increased traffic that it makes the road less safe. So we could use maybe some words like that.
Mhm.
So no significant decrease in the lifetime of the road or in safety of vehicular and pedestrian and bike traffic or whatever.
Plausible.
Okay, so shall not result in a significant decrease in the lifetime of the road.
And then some language about
local-
safety. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah.
And it's only local roads.
Hmm.
Impact the safety for pedestrians, bicycles, and other vehicles.
Mhm.
Try it.
Decrease in the lifetime of the road and increased impacts on, you said, in the pedestrian and vehicular safety.
Pedestrian, just a bicycle, and vehicular safety.
Negative impacts.
Yeah. Increase. And I think this one I might just kind of massage a little bit out. You know, I will bring up that there are just different schools of thought on this. I mean, some say that if you have, I'm not advocating for packed roads in Caroline, but if you have packed roads, people go slower, and you can argue that that is actually a safer place to be biking and walking.
All you have to do is
Well,
go to the
that
Hamptons.
works then.
Yeah. I know, and you know, well, it's
since
a
the
whole other
word-
discussion about road safety because we've been brainwashed by engineers.
But since the wording is safety,
Okay.
if you can really prove it's safer with lots of vehicles on it and still have the same lifetime, then you're okay.
Okay, that's good. And increased negative impacts. Something about this on the safety of you know, all
Pedestrian, bike,
users
and
of the
other
road.
vehicle. Yeah. All right, we're coming up on our 8 o'clock time. I just had
Yeah.
one quick thing on the site restoration, where that also is at the discretion of the review board, which is probably basically fine. I just worry, maybe the lawyer will strike it down and then we'll just let him do that. But whether that would seem to be arbitrary and capricious, that some developments have to have site restoration funds, but others don't. So I just don't know if we're on safe ground there, but.
I'd say leave that to the attorney.
Yeah.
review.
And I'm fine with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, the only place that I've seen this, and I brought this up a few meetings ago, was for solar developments. It's required for, you can just say all solar developments need to provide an escrow fund, or there's an abandonment clause in the law. But yeah, we could. I
Right.
think-
The solar law we're looking at has exactly that clause in it, but this is more the abandoned building eyesore gaping storefront
Yeah.
thing. That's really what this is for. I mean, that was why the comp plan called for an escrow fund, was, basically a chain coming in, opening a store for a dozen years and then leaving it, and we're left holding the bag on this Hulk that's falling apart.
Yeah.
I mean, is it true, Greg, that probably if the site plan was embedded in zoning, that you could then require this of commercial businesses of a certain kind as part of the generic requirement of the zoning law? I'm thinking of formulas. I've read that in a couple of formula business zoning conditions.
Yeah, it's appropriate.
But probably not in site plan without zoning. It might not hold up legally.
Well, I don't know about that. I think what the question right now is that can it be actually discretionary or not?
I
You know,
see.
versus just saying all developments coming through site plan need to post escrow funds.
Could you
So the lawyer will be asked this, is that?
Yeah, I'm sure he'll look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm, you know, well, it's good we're talking about this a little bit closer. Yeah, maybe the discretionary language is actually a little bit sort of.
So,
it
yeah, and so we can see what Guy says. I mean, and I'm trying to remember the exact wording in the comp plan, but both this and the economic impact recommendations had the phrase in the comp plan of like significant projects. Now, the idea wasn't that every little like mom and pop stand had to go like put up an escrow fund, right? But then
Yeah.
anything that was sort of more significant that might leave a bigger footprint behind would. And maybe there'll eventually be a way to put that in, but I you know, at this point, it's probably best to see what the lawyer thinks can fly.
Yeah,
Many
that's
of those stands that you talk about, Bill, would probably be vegetable stands, and they would be exempt through agriculture.
Or at least under 3,000 square feet, I'm sure.
Yeah, you know, now that we're looking at this, and I'm glad we're talking about this, it might be just appropriate to actually call out specific uses that are listed in, not necessarily the definition. Well, it could be the definitions, just listing out whatever uses the, you know, town board or task force want to recommend as requiring, and then it's just mandatory that those uses, you know, industrial uses over three, you know, need to post escrow funds. Or formula businesses as they're defined. But I agree. Maybe we should just leave it to the lawyer to kind of just answer that question, because it's not typical to just have this in kind of this place.
Can I suggest that this also might be an example of what might or might not be retained depending upon how site plan review gets enveloped, whether it's a standalone law or whether it would be enveloped under zoning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It would probably have different contexts and different standings that could be tweaked down the road.
Correct.
It might be a good time. I mean, there might be a few more minor tweaks that we need to make, and we could come back to this next week. I'm just trying to keep an eye on both the time and the calendar, since we're going to have to start, Greg's going to have to start really developing a report in the next week. And I do want us to be able to have time tonight for a more focused discussion of zoning as a tool, as a potential tool, which we have yet to do. We spent a lot of time on site plan and on formula business and economic development review, but we really, I think that the town board charged us with considering zoning as a potential tool. And we've heard an awful lot legally as we've moved through this process about how it could be potentially advantageous to enforcing the spirit of the laws that's being here written in site plan, et cetera. So could this be a good time for Greg to lead us into a discussion of that?
Certainly. I do have, Tim, one last thing, and maybe we can just take less
Sure.
than 5 minutes on this, is I did recommend to delete a certain word, and it might be minimal, but if I could just, I think that might be the last thing on site plan review. If I could just discuss that. It's the use of the word density for building density to be shown, and oh boy, maybe if I just want to be sure that, oh, here it is. Oh no, so it didn't show up there. Where did it?
It's on page 19.
Page 19, thank you. Thank you. So I had a question for the site plan subcommittee when I was just kind of compiling everything and reformatting. And I'm sorry, I'm keep going there. And it was the word building density. And I'm just recommending that it is removed just because, so architectural and design features, structures shall comply with the town design standards and be compatible with the rural character of the town as expressed in the town's comprehensive plan and with nearby natural and built features. This includes, but is not limited to, building placement, materials, massing, fenestration, entrances, density, rooftop equipment, etc. So density refers to, in this context, it seems that it refers to lot coverage. So essentially a ratio of building to site. Density can be measured in other ways. Typically, density is regulated through zoning, having what's called a floor area ratio if it's a very tall building. But in this case, I think in this context, it probably is referring to just the ratio of the building to the site layout. I think that placement captures that part of the development adequately, that the review board will be able to look at the placement of the development on the site. And if there's multiple buildings, they can look at the placement of those buildings. As I said in a side conversation and asking about density, there's this, as I've said, it can be referred to as lot coverage, and there's nowhere else in this law that talks about or defines lot coverage. And lot coverage is saying 50% of the site can be occupied by building or parking space or whatever, that, you know, it can just be sort of tweaked and like a number just thrown out there. There's no mention of that. And I would suggest, rather than deliberating on what percentage of the lot should be covered and what shouldn't be, it doesn't necessarily have to be in zoning. There can be separate lot coverage local laws. They often go with lot coverage and setback laws in very rural towns that don't have zoning. But I would recommend that I would personally recommend that lot coverage is included as part of a zoning ordinance, and for it to be removed here, and then it's mentioned elsewhere in this law. So are there any, oh, okay, so I removed it. It was right here before. It was building placement and density. So I just think that placement captures it appropriately. Is there any concerns with that? Okay, great. Thanks for that. I will remove that language. All right, and now I can go on to zoning. I think, I think I would just like to hear from you all. I mean, it's 8:10. I sent you a lot of things to read, and we scaled that back about a day later. My intention was to just provide a number of different rural examples to show you different options of zoning ordinances. Some are very simple, some are very complex. And so I think I just want to hear from you all about, questions you might have. The overarching question is, can zoning help to further the goals of the comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Greg, this is Mark. I
Yeah.
guess chime in here. I guess I would just ask you if to describe to us, what is unique about zoning in your view, in your professional view, that nothing else can do, or if it does have unique qualities, because I guess I see the task of this group as identifying what each of these things that we're considering can do for the town, what's unique about each one, and what the pros and cons of each one are, and then providing that information and insight to the board. So.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. That's a good question to address. So what zoning can do, to keep it very simple for right now, is that it can regulate the placement of uses and where they go. Compared to, we've been looking at site plan review the most through here, and there are areas in the site plan review that we've looked at where maybe certain development, it can't be located on floodplains or wetlands, or, now it's being proposed to be strengthened by agricultural soils. So there's some element of the site plan review law is starting to regulate maybe where uses can go, but it doesn't delineate between the uses. It just says that uses that fall within this list of uses need to adhere to these standards of the site plan review law. The benefit of zoning is that absent any other types of thresholds, such as a commercial use above 3,000 feet versus a commercial use less than 3,000 feet, the zoning ordinance can regulate just uses just outright in terms of their location, their siting, their density on their lot. And what's useful about a zoning ordinance is that it can describe the processes of each type of approval in the ordinance, whereas absent a zoning ordinance, there would have to just be a set of other different laws about the site plan review board and the planning board, and other types of uses that might go, or other types of review procedures. So that's a benefit of having it kind of all packaged together, relating into the uses themselves. I think, yeah, another benefit is there was an email today about having an agricultural district and then certain uses allowed by a special use permit or by site plan review approval. So those can be delineated very clearly in a zoning ordinance, and
since everybody wasn't on that email, Greg, I think the example was what would give, say, a farmer permission to develop 2 to 3 houses on a small section of land within that district, right? That was the example.
Oh yeah, okay. I thought that was to everyone. Okay, I'm sorry if some people weren't on that, but yeah, the town is afforded through a zoning ordinance to say, we want X, Y, and Z use to go through special use considerations or through site plan review, and we don't want these other uses to necessarily go through that. It can delineate very clearly by there can be a hierarchy of review. So uses by right, and for those of you not familiar with that phrase, it's just that it's part of your bundle of sticks as a private property owner. You can build your treehouse for your children. Use by right. But then there's other layers of review that get a little bit more involved with public hearings and review agencies, that a zoning ordinance can sort of just house all of those types of review processes within. But yeah, I guess just to sum up this sort of long-winded is that it really, the benefit is that it can delineate the areas in the town where uses can be allowed. And it can be to the benefit of people that want to preserve land and also create and have economic activity. It can sort of do both. It can allow economic centers that can be very concentrated. And then it can allow rural space or agricultural space, open space, public space to be protected as such. So there are kind of these gray areas, because as I think are aware, there are local laws that can do some of the tasks. We've just said, or I've mentioned that the town of Caroline could adopt a lot coverage and setback law to regulate uses that are required to be set back from a property line or to have no more coverage on a lot of a certain size. But I think so some of them can be done through local laws. It's just having a zoning ordinance can just clearly identify where in the town uses can be allowed, and the development of those pieces of property. They can be very tailored to specific uses. And I think that's the main difference, is that regulations can be tailored to uses.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Greg. Yep.
Could the lot coverage law treat industrial development differently than housing? If there was a lot coverage law, could it be tailored to the kind of use that that lot was being put to?
Yeah, I don't believe it. Yeah, yes.
That would be all right,
Yeah.
not discriminatory.
So I guess I'll chime in here if that's all right on, the basic question of zoning. I think what Greg summed up, which is essentially the ability to have geographic differences is key. If my view is, if you look at the comprehensive plan, we actually cannot attain a lot of the goals in the plan probably without zoning. And one of those is indeed the protection of open space. Because if you can't determine that, industries can't go everywhere, right? Then you can't try to protect something as open space. And that's definitely a key goal in the comprehensive plan. We have discovered that if one wanted to restrict form of businesses, that zoning law is almost a prerequisite. And my own view is not that we have to keep them all out. I think some people here do feel that way, and I understand that, but that I would want them to be in certain places of the town that I thought that would complement. And I think that takes something like zoning. Certainly, there's a strong call out in the comprehensive plan for setting up some of our own environmental standards in a town environmental quality review act that, as I'm now learning from folks, is that's also almost certainly has to be housed inside zoning to really have appropriate effect. And as we've seen with the site plan. So with that on the side for zoning, I found it really enlightening, insightful to read some of this stuff, particularly the criticisms of zoning in some of the materials Greg put out. And I understand the reluctance. I don't want to give up any of my rights to do what I want on my property either. But the corollary of I can do what I want is that my neighbor can do what they want. And that can really impact my property value if my neighbor decides to put up a noxious plant, right? It's not likely, but it could happen. So one way to protect everyone as we get into a more dense town arrangement is to separate incompatible uses. And that's what zoning allows. But zoning run amok that tries to micromanage every last little thing is not right for Caroline. It would totally destroy, I think, the ethos of this community. And those are some of the criticisms brought out in those papers. And so I would definitely want something very sort of simple and clean and that has a few basic designations, but doesn't try to micromanage exactly what each parcel needs to look like. Because I think that would be overly restrictive for Caroline. So that's where I sit on this now. And it's not necessarily where I was a year ago, but anyway, I honestly just don't think we can do some of the things that the comp plan says we ought to do if we don't have the support structure of zoning. So that's kind of where I sit in the question.
Yeah, I think it's a positive good that zoning could accomplish for the hamlets. If we want to see development nucleated so that people can walk to places, walk to stores, we want to encourage commercial development within walking distance of places or with easy transport access. So it's not just a negative protecting from X, but encouraging the clustering of certain uses where they'll do the most good.
Yes, a good point. And the one last point I wanted to make is to Ellen's point about industrial uses versus residents having different setbacks. I think it's important that, like, if you had zoning, you could say you could have different residential setbacks in different parts of the town, like different in Brookendale than in the middle of the boonies, which I think would be important to be able to do. I would not want to set up a law on, how far off the road you can be that applied the same way everywhere in town. That wouldn't be appropriate. We can't make that nuanced distinction without zoning. Or, as Barbara just pointed out, try to get a denser development near hamlets and keep less development elsewhere without the fine tool of zoning.
So what Bill and Barbara just said sounds to me like how do we build incentives into zoning? How do we have an incentivization or in the zoning process? And for me, the most potent paragraph of all the reading was in the "What's So Bad About Zoning" article, in the first page, the second column toward the bottom. He said, successful communities think beyond conventional zoning. They use education, incentives, and voluntary initiatives, not just regulation. They also use design standards, incentive zoning, overlay zoning, density bonuses, and other innovative techniques. What are those? What are all those things? And because they sound like they might be right for Caroline.
Yeah, good questions, Rebecca. Some of them, I mean, I can't go into detail. I think just given our time on all those, especially something like density bonuses, that probably wouldn't be appropriate for Caroline. What that is that's applied in a very urban place, typically, where it allows a lot to be developed more intensely than it otherwise would be allowed to be developed if it meets certain criteria. But something that's common often in a rural place is what's called, and we've talked about this before, transfer of development rights. And Tompkins County does have an active program of that, purchase of development rights, which are separate than transfer development rights. But that's a way to incentivize land being protected and to have rights of development should be transferred elsewhere.
That takes a lot of money.
Yeah, and that's why Joan, who was on the phone earlier or on our call earlier, said that it's not that she said it's good in Tompkins County. It's protected about 2,000 acres, but
Not
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think, Rebecca, just to follow up, yeah, there certainly are ways to incentivize, and not just through zoning, to have good development and appropriate development. There are very unique ways, and I don't think we have the time to be necessarily discussing them now. And I'm certainly not an expert on all the incentives by any means. I mean, but there are very creative ways to incentivize development, and some could be through exceptions in an ordinance about if the development, there used to be a form of zoning that was used a lot called performance zoning. It's less used these days, but that was basically about reviewing a development about its performance, and then it might be regulated differently based on the performance of the development. But it's less of a traditional form of zoning these days.
And what's overlay zoning?
Yeah, good question. So overlay zoning is where an example would be having an overlay flood zone district. Because we're in the Finger Lakes, almost every community along a Finger Lake has a lakeshore overlay zone, where there's just a different set of regulations that apply. And it's just a little bit of they're just different. You could almost look at it as a different zone district, but it just provides sort of another level of review and another level of standards that might be appropriate for floodplains or maybe a historic district. So often a historic district will have a historic overlay zone. Yeah.
And Greg, this is the understanding I've come to, so tell me if I'm on the right track here. You've got, say the town is zoned, so it's got these different regions marked out. And an overlay zone is like you take a transparency and set it on top of that, and you squiggle a new thing, a new shape that happens to cover over some of the zones below it because that's the floodplain, say. And so that's the overlay zone, that it crosses over your regular zones, and this set of rules applies in that special thing you've drawn on the transparency.
Correct. Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Thank you, Bill.
And Greg, and following up along this, just having looked at, I mean, we all looked at a couple of maps, I think. One of the things that was noticeable is that many towns have apparently multiple uses in particular zones, such as residential and agriculture. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah. So most agricultural zone districts do allow for single family homes to be built because the traditional farming practice is that you lived on a piece of land and you farmed it as well. And so most agricultural zone districts would just allow single family homes to be built. And we see it all the time up in Cuyahoga County that somebody sells off a piece of their land and then they're sold to be developed into single family homes. So one piece is just allowing that extra use. So allowing a single family home, and it could just be as simple as that. It's agricultural, how New York State defines it, and this zone district allows single family homes. And it could be just that. Or you could add more uses that are allowed, maybe by right or by a special use permit review, by a site plan review, maybe all of site plan review and special use permit to go through a two-step process. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just trying to help us understand how these mixed uses might work and how, whether or not zoning would preclude that or could encourage it or could celebrate it. I mean, a lot of this I'm thinking as well in relationship to different means of incentivizing a certain kind of growth in ways that would be compatible with the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on that. And Ken, I see your hand, Ken. I'll just call right on you just to follow up on Tim's. It really just comes down to where the town is going. Is if the town does move forward with zoning, and the zoning commission would host public meetings, open houses, and it would just be a back and forth. It would, ideally zoning kind of falls somewhere in the middle. That it can be very restrictive. This zone district only allows one use and nothing else, period. And that is allowed through zoning. Or it could say, like Lansing, I sent around, I think about a few months ago, I sent out Lansing's agricultural zone district allows everything, it seems like. Retail, and so it just didn't seem, well, anyway, I'm not going to bash on Lansing. It's just how their town, through public hearings and public consensus, and ideally, everyone was heard, farmers and people of business, residential, everybody was heard, and there was some sort of middle ground met. But Ken, I want to jump to you because I saw you waving your hand.
Well, two things, I guess, from my point of view. Bill sent out an email with two different scenarios on it, and I probably fall in basically in that first scenario, wanting not to have zoning and being able to sell a lot when I need to. But at the same time, the second one, as I read it, the individual wants to have more farmland. And the way he wants to get it, it seems like if we put zoning around him and around him, reduce then the cost of land so that he can more or less buy it. But at the same time, without zoning, he has zoned himself. He said, I'm going to take care of this, like most of the other farmers in the area that are that their livelihood is farming. And the second point I got is from what you're saying right now is, let's just take, I got some acres that border 79. Let's say I had 25 acres there, and it was zoned commercial with a second, I don't want to call it zoning, but the use of agriculture in that zone. So that if some a commercial outfit came in and wanted to buy 2 or 3 acres, they could have that be sold to them, but I could still farm the rest of it. I believe that would be the case of what you're just talking about, an overlay.
Actually, Ken, yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I did want to bring that up some point tonight. Caroline is a right to farm community. So, and I don't have the law, actually I have it up right here, but I won't read through it. But essentially, regardless of zoning, you can farm, you can conduct agriculture anywhere in the town. So even if that piece of property is zoned commercial and you're looking for buyers, in the meantime, you can farm it.
And I think also more directly to your point, Ken, is if it were an agricultural zone along Route 79, but agricultural zone in the sense of how Lansing has defined it, then certain commercial uses are allowed. Not all of them, but certain ones. That we said, Greg, that they had certain allowances of commercial inside the ag zone.
Yeah, many.
Okay, so therefore, in that sense, Ken, you'd be not restricted at all in selling your property as long as the prospective commercial buyer fell within the dozen or more, categories that were allowed in that ag zone.
But it's not going to hurt to be zoned commercial and do agriculture there.
Right.
Multiple use.
Okay.
Yasmin.
Yeah, I think everyone, I think in this forum agree that the zoning is necessary, but the question is maybe about the degree of flexibility. Just like in the case of Lansing, maybe too much flexible. Maybe the other side is too rigid. So maybe if we can make it in between, then we can have a good zoning. Because sometimes, like maybe if we divide the whole town into like district zoning, this is industrial, this is agriculture, and then all of a sudden somebody in residential area found something to do business, and the person is in wheelchair. Does it need to move to other place to conduct the business, or just build the business at the residential area, something like that? So the point is degree of the flexibility, I guess. Zoning is okay, but there is a degree of it.
Yeah, it's a good point, Yasmin, and I'll just follow up with saying that I don't think that's necessarily the task of this task force to figure out that middle ground, because it's going to take quite a few open houses, tours. I mean, there should be industry experts. There should be all types of, even like a site tour to local farms would be great, just to understand operations there, and just doing things like that, a really detailed analysis of the town. And that's what the zoning commission would be tasked with, is kind of making sure that it's a very transparent process, very inclusive of everyone, and to find where that is, because it just comes down to values and philosophy and town leadership and what they're willing to do. I mean, because you could say, yeah, we have zoning, but we allow all uses everywhere. I mean, so zoning, then what's the point of it? And so you can use zoning very strategically, or you can use zoning, not. And anyway, I guess you can, just to be strategic with it. If it were to be, the question is, do you think it can help to further the goals in the comprehensive plan? That's, and if there's still kind of questions about that, that's where I think we should, noodle on a little bit.
I have a question about how we encourage nodal development without zoning. What would another tool be? Is there another tool?
Not really, no.
Because
Rebecca,
nodal development seems like one of the bigger prongs of the comprehensive plan.
Rebecca asked an excellent question and something
Yeah.
that obviously I've
Good
been
question.
grappling with for a year plus, hard. And the problem was, so the answer is some communities, right, you can offer tax incentives, right? Or you negotiate a payment in lieu of taxes rather than, to encourage a business to be somewhere. Those are options, but frankly, the town, the town tax, they don't have a lot of wiggle room in terms of like discounting taxes here for this one and then rating everybody else, or school taxes when it being such a huge chunk, if the town doesn't control that. So I never came up with, it doesn't mean there isn't, but I never came up with another tool that I could think the town would actually be able to use to encourage nodal development. I was looking for various ways the town could maybe use tax policy to do that. And again, I just never came up with something that seemed that A, the town could do legally, and that B, seemed to have too much money, enough money with it that it could actually be an incentive.
Right.
Yeah, I would echo that, Rebecca, that just to provide a very simple kind of an picture, and I'm not recommending this necessarily for Caroline, but it's, Carol and Joan talked about this. Caroline could have 2 zone districts. It could say agricultural and then commercial, and the commercial could just be in the hamlets. And then essentially only commercial development can happen then in those hamlets moving forward. Again, I'm not necessarily recommending that's how Caroline should go about that, but that at the kind of to answer your question, that is through zoning.
Of course, then Greg, another possible use of zoning could also be conceivably delineating areas for potential industrial or light industrial use.
Correct.
As
Correct.
opposed to what we have now, where industrial or light industrial use can just pop up absolutely anywhere. So that there could be some light touches to zoning, right, where it would help give the town more guidance in terms of what would be a preferable means of development for the future. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the town can really call the zone districts whatever they want to call them. Hamlet zone district, industrial zone district. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just that zone district will be defined like we've seen in the site plan review law. It's just defined, and then uses are allowed under that. Any other thoughts or questions? But what I was thinking, maybe when we have 20 minutes left. As you all could tell, I do not have the report ready to be sent out, and that's because last time we sort of ended with we weren't sure yet of the short-term and long-term recommendations, moving forward. And I thought maybe it would be good by the end of this meeting to at least just propose some. And I have some thoughts about kind of some short-term and long-term recommendations, but maybe I just hear from you all about this, or if there's still want to be discussion on zoning. Certainly we could, if we need to take the rest of the time, we need to take the rest of the time. Maybe I'll throw that to Tim. I thought that maybe we could just have some time to be, before I want to send the report to the task force. I don't want there to be any surprises. I want to say, here's what the recommendations of the task force are.
No, Greg, that's fine. I just thought that we needed to have a task force zoning pause.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
Articulated some of these options, and so that we could all express ourselves. But I think it would make sense to spend a little bit of time talking about action items. Sure. What were you thinking of recommending?
Well, I guess I just want to make sure, is there anything else about zoning? Because certainly, that is, we have only spent, I guess, 25 minutes on it. So I want to make sure that we have, everyone's get everything out there they wanted to talk about.
Rick, I'll just, there's something called form-based zoning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we've really talked about that tonight. And does that address kind of what we've been talking about, or would that address what we've been talking about with the site plan law?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so form-based zoning is just another type of zoning. I almost went into it in my very long email to you all, and I decided it is not appropriate at that point. But yeah, zoning has been sort of branched off over the years into different types of zoning. And so it started as use-based, and so separating land uses. And I mentioned performance zoning earlier in this discussion, where zone districts were regulated by the projected or intended performance of those uses that are going in those zone districts. That was a very short-lived type of zoning. It was really hard to measure and to review. What Mark is talking about now is that a becoming more and more common type of zoning ordinance is not use-based, it is form-based. The philosophy behind, so form meaning a form of a building. So just think about any commercial building. Let's say just the Dandy Mart. So there's a certain form to that building, and the philosophy behind form-based zoning is that many uses take similar forms and therefore have similar impacts. So an industrial use, maybe if it can look and operate in the same form as a gas station, then maybe they should be allowed in the same zone district. Yeah, I mean, I can go into much more detail on that, but I think that's just it in a nutshell. And that's where I was working out in Colorado. It was a very form-based zone district. So it regulated the building size and said there was a whole long process to put it together. But hearing from industry experts about what types of uses can actually be a part of these certain forms.
Mhm. So it can be a combination of place-based plus form-based.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is the more flexible approach. The use base is more, it's called Euclidean zoning. You might hear that phrase. It comes from Euclid, Ohio, where zoning was founded. And so Euclidean zoning and form-based zoning can just sort of kind of go together. But that's getting into it a little bit, but yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
And so I would imagine then that that a zoning commission would consider all of these different types of zoning. Euclidean, as a native Clevelander, I'll just bring that one up again. So Euclidean zoning or Hamlet zoning or whatever. So that we as a task force, if we're going to make a recommendation that the town board engage in the next steps to proceed with a zoning commission, we don't then have to recommend that it be a particular type of zoning, right?
Correct. Anything else?
So that would then bring us perhaps to action items in the report.
Yeah.
So what are you conceiving of as action items? I mean, I could think of three kind of high level action items. One would be for the board to proceed with public hearings and revision as needed and adoption of the site plan review law. Similarly, adoption of the design standards, and then third, enabling a zoning commission to move forward with examining or developing zoning options for the town of Caroline. So those are kind of three high level to-dos or recommendations. Is that what you have in mind, or you think of something more granular?
No, that's what I was thinking it would be of just the high level process. And given everything that we've researched and considered for Caroline. Helen?
We've also talked, tonight the idea of a nuisance ordinance came up. I know there has been discussion about trying to identify scenic resources, and the question of whether we want to recommend that as something to look into. what other things had we talked about? I mean, I know in the comp plan, Bill, you'll probably have things you can mention, but I think there has been discussion of a junk ordinance over time.
It seems to me that there are two tiers of potential action items. That there are the big ones like the site plan review law and perhaps the zoning commission. Then there are a number of littler ones, like some of the ones that Ellen was just mentioning, like the nuisance law. The economic development subgroup, one of the things that we've been sort of batting around is the need for more baseline data about what the economy of Caroline actually looks like. I know the comprehensive plan includes some important stuff on housing, but wouldn't it be nice to get a master's student in planning to think about what the commercial geography of the town is, so that when we move forward, we have more information, or if we require economic impact review, we can add it. But that's a littler, that's sort of, it's not one of the big ones, but it could also be there.
Responding to what Ellen said, I mean, there are indeed a number of things in the comp plan, but they really, and not this, they weren't part of the charge of this task force. The charge of the task force, Tim has enumerated a number of times, was about 4 things. And I think that what Robert Newt listed out was essentially, I think, where I think this has to come out in terms of the charge of the task force. Nuisance ordinance, I guess it could be a recommendation that we've identified various other things that seem to be beneficial. But I also would agree with the idea of the economic baseline data, because economic impact analysis was indeed one of the suggestions coming down for the task force. And so the recommendation, and this would be under the long-term part, would be, this seems good, but it also, we felt that a baseline was needed if this is going to be pursued further.
Mm-hmm.
Greg, I have a practical question that you might be able to help us answer, and I guess that would have to do with the manner in which one would proceed. So if one were typically, let's say that we're going to be recommending a zoning commission and then spending time developing that, would then you recommend passing a new site plan review law before that? I'm just trying to understand the general progression of these sorts of things. Or would you anticipate it would be wrapped up within that?
Mm-hmm.
How does this usually work?
Yeah, good question. And I was going to be asking you all some questions to help me answer that. But in general, the zoning process will include site plan review. Site plan review is just a function, or can be a function of zoning, and so those go together. So I guess I was going to ask if the town needs site plan review updated prior to having zoning. For instance, if there wasn't going to be a moratorium extension, that if it just wanted to have this updated law in place while it was working on other land use guidance, then that would be appropriate to be adopting, something so there's no gap in that review. So to follow up, it's just that if there is going to be an extension of the moratorium, however that long that may be, to work on the zoning ordinance, and maybe your attorney would weigh in about this, my recommendation would be to table the site plan review law and work on zoning and then include that updated site plan review law as part of the zoning process.
But if,
Yeah, I agree with getting some advice from Guy, but I think one of the things we read, sort of my understanding is that typically during the process of the zoning commission, a moratorium is often in place to avoid sort of a rush to develop. That is that, you know, if someone was kind of thinking of maybe doing something, they suddenly do it because there's going to be zoning a year from now and maybe I won't be able to do it. And so it's quite common for there to be a moratorium during the process of developing zoning. I'm not quite sure what Caroline should do. We've already had this moratorium for X number of months. I don't know how much longer we can extend the moratorium and how much longer it's fair to extend the moratorium in town. And so I don't know what to do about, well, let's pass the site plan and then work on zoning and have a new moratorium. I think Guy Crow needs to give us some advice.
well, I mean, some of that falls into board territory to a certain extent in terms of
Yes.
whether another moratorium would be extended, et cetera, so probably we don't need to focus on that so much. But I mean, I think what's helpful for us to strategize about is, let's say, I mean, it's likely this moratorium is going to be extended. Let's say that the extension, though, isn't going to end up lasting as long as it would take to develop a zoning law. Then I would imagine that this task force would want to recommend adoption of the revised site plan review in the meantime as a stopgap measure, right? And that could be part of our action items.
Okay.
And it's ready to go. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
and my hunch is, even if there were a zoning commission, all the work that was done on this, my hunch is it's probably pretty likely to stand almost as is, because you've done so much detailed research. And it would just take some of the weight off the zoning commission, as a matter of fact, not having to deal with that piece of it.
Yeah, it would just be, I could see at a minimum, it would just be reorganized. So in a zoning ordinance, it might list a table of uses and it would just say which uses go under site plan review. But otherwise, yes, there's been such good work on it that it would be inefficient to just kind of throw that out and start from scratch. Yeah, it's very, very good work and good, thoughtful kind of approach to it. So that's why I kind of wanted to flip that question on you all. You know, it's a little bit of a balanced of question and answer there. Of it depends on what Caroline is going, but it sounds like what I heard and what I saw the thumbs up is that, and this is good for me as I kind of put together my report, is just that from what I'm hearing is that the task force recommends that the town board consider the adoption of the revised site plan review and design standards. We've not gone into detail about whether they're going to be combined. At this point, they are separate, and so you know, as they are with one being a local law, how it's written, and one being a resolution. So we haven't gone into the detail about whether those would be combined, or Tim, you said you might want to just review them all together.
I think my point at the time was, as I understand it, the town board made them separate to make it easier to mess around with the design standards without holding public hearings. And I just thought that sounded kind of silly, because I'm sure this town board would want to hold public hearings. So I just thought it would be cleaner just to wrap them into one entity. But that, I have no strong opinion about it.
Sure.
I don't know what everybody thinks.
I mean, I thought what you said made sense, which is, so long as a moratorium is in place and we're working towards zoning, if it's done in a timely fashion, then we don't need to adopt this site plan ordinance now, revised. But as somebody on the site plan review committee, I'm sure going to want to have this in my hands when I get a development proposal.
Yes.
So, you know, the time it takes to pass this thing has to be taken into account and has to happen before a moratorium is over.
just to clarify that that wouldn't happen until the moratorium is over. So
I don't understand. Explain.
I'm just saying, I'm just saying you wouldn't see a review application until if the board proceeded with zoning, and that would, I think that would call for an extension of the moratorium
Until something is passed.
until something is passed, right?
And with that, that's fine.
But probably the task force would want to build in a caveat that were the moratorium to expire prior to resolution of zoning, that it would recommend
Adoption.
passage of the revision of the site plan review law.
And while I think those are the priorities, right? That's our priority items, the things we've been working on, and then looking at zoning. But we were also charged with looking at any other tool that may promote the town's vision at the discretion of the committee and subject to guidance and or recommendations to town board. So tools such as a new
Ordinance.
tools such as, the things we just talked about, a scenic identification of scenic views. We're recommending that scenic views be part of what's considered, but we realize that defining them is not straightforward. So I think we do want to include in our recommendations to the town board these other things that have come up, but sort of say, let's concentrate on the zoning and the site plan review law.
Sounds good. I think that, and also there's the chance the town board would decide not to pursue zoning, in which case they strongly recommend passing the revised site plan review law and guidelines. And I'm a little, there was a process by which the views were identified. So I guess we're talking about Caroline should do more on that because we didn't do enough last round. We didn't contribute enough. I think that's what you were. Yeah. Okay. And what else was I going to say? I had one other point I was going to make, but of course, I think that the question Greg actually had was whether the design guidelines wind up getting wrapped into the law. Is that what you said earlier? That there is no longer a separate resolution from the law, that everything's in one?
The way that they're written right now, that we followed the subcommittee followed the same model as the current standards, which are there's a site plan review law that refers to a resolution passed set of guidelines. And so the way the edits are made, it's following the same format. Maybe.
And Tim said he was agnostic as to whether it was kept separate or put together. Am I right on that, Tim?
More or less.
Okay. So I guess the question to the rest of the task force, do we care how it's done?
I'm getting a little lost. I don't think I understand whether which is separate from what.
That we do have still some design guidelines that are a document separate from the site plan review law.
Correct. And we are now.
And the question is that essentially design guidelines become essentially merged into and become part of the site plan review law, as opposed to something that's passed by resolution by the town board that are referred to by the site plan law. Do I have it straight?
And I'm sorry, are you referring to the revised, I think we're calling them standards, not guidelines?
Yes, sorry, I apologize, standards.
I was confused. We currently have some guidelines that have been adopted by resolution, okay? And we are now proposing to turn those into standards, and they need to be adopted somewhere by somebody, and that's the question, right?
Now, so my question is whether or not if a resolution for design guidelines would have the same
standard
would have the same teeth as if the design guidelines were included in a local law. So as I've been hearing throughout the past few months, in terms of the hierarchy of legislation, is local law seems to have more teeth, more enforceable teeth than a resolution. And I might be misled in that, but that's why I had always thought that it would be better to combine the two. Mark?
I'll just chime in that I have come around to thinking that that having them separate creates more confusion than any good in terms of functionality. So I think as my understanding is that those design guidelines, as they were formerly called, are, whether they're separate or included in the law, they are things that the developers have to address as articulated, however they're articulated. So I lean towards what Tim is advocating, to include them in the text of the law as well. So and certainly that could be clarified by the attorney as well. So.
Okay. And I personally don't care one way or the other, and they are, as you now, design standards. And I have to sign off now. So thank you all, everybody.
Thank you, Bill.
Have a good night.
And I think it's probably time when we can all, I think about signing off. So Greg, do you feel like you have enough guidance now?
Yes, I hear consensus on site plan review and design standards, excuse me, should be recommended to be reviewed and adopted first by the town board. But and then in terms of how they're structured, I'm not hearing any objection to them being combined. So I think what I'll do in this next round of revisions is just combine them in some creative way, and then let you all, and then you all can take a look at that. But the last question, I just want to know where everyone is about, because I think the second recommendation is that the town board appoint a zoning commission. And so I don't know if we have consensus on that, or just where everyone stands, but that's what I'm hearing that the two recommendations are. So I'm seeing Ken is not okay with that. Where does everyone stand with their, okay? Usman, Rebecca, Ellen? Okay, Rebecca, how about you?
I'm in favor of that.
Okay, so.
I know that Bill is, because Bill said you can't implement the comp plan without it.
Okay.
And I wanted to, I think that you said the group recommends first adopting the site plan review law and standards, but I thought what we agreed was we're happy to see that adopted as part of a zoning ordinance. But if a zoning ordinance is not adopted before the end of a moratorium, we need to have the site plan review law in place.
Please.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. I've got that. I understand that. Yes. Great. I'll write that. I'll try to explain that well in there. So. Okay. And then, okay, that's all I need to do to move forward.
And then the report will also mention these other analyses that we think are important and of interest, but potentially could wait until the zoning ordinance is taken care of.
Yes. So as you saw my outline, and I will redo the outline a little bit, but I am going to just at least touch on the subjects that we were specifically tasked to research: formula business, economic impact review, and some of the zoning and some of the other ones. But then, yes, I will put in things that have come up as part of our conversations. I have a list here: nuisance, scenic resources, junk, other things that have come up to maybe just to touch on as future projects. I mean, there's always going to be projects to do in the town. So,
The economic baseline data collection.
yeah, I have that too.
Good.
Thank you.
In terms of calendar, Greg, is it the least bit conceivable to have some kind of a draft to consider next week? I'm just looking at the calendar, and next
Yes.
week, 30th.
Yes, that is my goal to get you
by the 10th. Then that would give us 2 weeks to do it.
Yes. So that is my goal. Yep, to get it to you within a couple days of next week's meeting.
Well, that'd be great. I mean, I can't express to all of you, at least my personal gratitude on behalf of the board for the detailed work that's happened. Really, I mean, so rapidly and economically, it's really going to be incredibly helpful.
The best way you can thank us is by seeing it gets through the town board.
We will try. I think it's a pretty reasonable proposal myself.
Yeah. Two of us are here, so.
Okay.
Lobby the
Okay, well,
rest.
thanks, everyone. Very happy Thanksgiving. Stay away from COVID. It's all over the frickin' place right now. And, but Renee texted me a minute ago. Our son is here from New York and we've been trying to figure out how we can have Thanksgiving dinner because he's secluded on the other side of the house. It's supposed to be 56 degrees on Thanksgiving Day.
Is it?
Open
We have
windows.
dinner outside.
It's gonna be raining.
Oh, don't
Cover-
say.
All right, have a good night.
Okay,
Happy
good night.
Thanksgiving,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Greg.
Good night,
Thanks,
Good
everybody.
everybody.
night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, thank you, Ken.
Good night.
Recording's off, Mark. You want to stop recording?
I don't know, can I do that? Oh, because I do have control.
Yeah. Or was I?
I-
recording?
You were recording,
Oh,
Tim.
great. I don't even know what to do now. So I stop it, but how do I?
Just go down to the